The moment I saw my name tag at my son's wedding reception, I knew exactly what Vanessa Sterling Williams thought of me. Dorothy Williams, the charity case, her wealthy family erupted in laughter as I stared at those cruel words written in her perfect calligraphy. I smiled politely, placed the tag on my navy blue dress that suddenly felt shabby next to their designer gowns, and quietly excused myself to make one phone call. By morning they discover what real charity looks like. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Let me tell you how we got here, because this story starts 6 months before that humiliating Saturday evening in June. My son Michael had fallen head over heels for Vanessa Sterling, a beautiful 29-year-old from old Connecticut money, the kind of money that builds wings on museums and names libraries after dead relatives. When Michael first brought her home, I could see the disdain in her perfectly sculpted features as she surveyed my modest living room with its worn furniture and family photos in drugstore frames. "How quaint," she'd said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "It's so refreshing to see someone who isn't obsessed with material things." Even then I bit my tongue. My boy was happy, and at 42 he deserved love. Only he could have seen past her beauty to the coldness underneath. But love, as I've learned in my 68 years, makes fools of the wisest men. The engagement party was my first real taste of what I was up against. Held at the Sterling family estate in Greenwich, it was a showcase of wealth that made my head spin. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings painted by artists whose names I recognized from museum placards. The guest list read like a social register filled with people whose conversations centered on yacht clubs and charity galas I'd never be invited to attend. Michael's mother-in-law, Patricia Sterling, had introduced me to her friends, her tone suggesting I was something unfortunate that had attached itself to her daughter's happiness. "She's from Ohio." The way she said it made Ohio sound like a third world country, but I played my part. I smiled, complimented the hors d'oeuvres, and pretended not to notice how conversations died when I approached. After all, I had my reasons for staying quiet. Some games require patience, and I've always been very, very patient. The wedding planning process revealed just how deep the Sterling family's contempt ran. Every decision was made without consulting me, despite my repeated offers to help. When I suggested contributing to the rehearsal dinner, Patricia Sterling had actually laughed out loud. "Oh, Dorothy, how sweet," she'd cooed. "But we simply couldn't allow you to strain your limited resources. This is going to be quite expensive, you understand." Limited resources. If only she knew. But I kept playing the role of the struggling widow, the woman who cleaned houses and took odd jobs to make ends meet. Wasn't entirely false. I had done those things, just not recently. Not for the past 3 years since my dear Harold passed and left me his little empire. But the Sterlings didn't need to know that. Not yet. Michael tried to include me. Bless his heart. He'd call with updates about venue bookings and menu tastings, always apologizing for another event I somehow wasn't invited to. "Mom, I'm sure it was just an oversight," he'd say when I mentioned missing the cake testing or the flower selection meeting. "Vanessa's been so stressed with all the planning." Stressed. I imagine coordinating a $200,000 wedding while simultaneously planning ways to exclude your future mother-in-law would be exhausting work. The bridal shower was particularly enlightening. I wasn't invited, of course, but Michael insisted Vanessa reconsider. It would mean so much to Mom, he'd pleaded. So she extended a last-minute invitation, The kind that makes it clear you're only welcome because someone forced the issue. I arrived at the country club bearing a modest gift, a simple crystal vase from Visit. Nothing too expensive for someone in my supposed financial situation. The other gifts were works of art. Hermes scarves, Tiffany jewelry, silk lingerie that cost more than most people's rent. When Vanessa opened my gift, she held it up with the same expression you'd use for roadkill. Practical, she announced to the room. Every bride needs something from the discount store. The laughter that followed wasn't kind. It was the sound wealthy people make when they encounter something beneath their notice. But I just smiled and sipped my champagne, making mental notes about each woman's face. Each cruel chuckle. Information, I've learned, is far more valuable than pride. The wedding day dawned perfect. Cloudless sky, gentle breeze, the kind of weather that photographers dream about. The Sterling estate had been transformed into something from a fairy tale, with white roses climbing trellises and string quartets positioned throughout the gardens. It was beautiful. I'll give them that. Money, whatever its source, can certainly buy beauty. Chosen my outfit carefully. A navy blue dress from Nordstrom Rack. Simple but elegant. Nothing that would upstage the bride or draw unwanted attention from the wedding photographer. I wanted to blend in, to be forgettable. Sometimes the best revenge starts with being underestimated. The ceremony was lovely. Watching Michael's face as Vanessa walked down the aisle in her $15,000 Vera Wang gown. For a moment I almost forgot my purpose. Almost let myself believe that maybe I'd misjudged her, that love might soften her sharp edges. Then she caught my eye during the ring exchange and gave me a look that could freeze champagne. The reception was where everything unraveled. Found my table, number 12, naturally, tucked away near the kitchen doors with Michael's college roommates and their wives. Not with family. Family was at table 1, where the stirrings held court. Like royalty receiving subjects. But I didn't mind. Better positioning for what was coming. That's when I saw it. Name tags at each place, setting written in Vanessa's perfect calligraphy. Most were simple. Patricia Sterling James. Sterling Michael Williams, but mine read Dorothy Williams. The charity case. The breath caught in my throat. Not from hurt. I'd expected cruelty from the sheer audacity of it. She'd actually put it in writing. This woman who would soon discover that charity is a two-way street. Oh my goodness, Patricia Sterling gasped as she noticed my tag, her hand flying to her throat in mock horror. Vanessa, darling, surely this is some kind of mistake. But Vanessa's smile was razor sharp. No mistake at all. I thought honesty was important in family relationships. Her eyes met mine. Across the table. Don't you agree, Dorothy? After all, we wouldn't want anyone to get ideas above their station. The laughter started with Richard Sterling, a booming sound that encouraged others to join in. Soon half the table was chuckling at the clever word play, at the delicious cruelty of publicly humiliating the groom's mother. At her own son's wedding. I stood up slowly, placed the name tag carefully on my purse and smiled. You're absolutely right, Vanessa. Honesty is very important in family relationships. I think it's time for some honesty all around. Then I walked away. I found a quiet corner in the Sterling Estates library, surrounded by leather-bound books that probably cost more per volume than most people's car payments. The irony wasn't lost on me, making the call. That would change everything while surrounded by the symbols of their supposed superiority. My fingers didn't shake as I dialed. They should have, considering what I was about to set in motion. But I've never been one for dramatics, just cold, calculated action when the situation demands it. Robert. It's Dorothy. I know it's Saturday evening, but I need you to execute the sterling portfolio adjustments we discussed. All of them tonight. Robert Hayes has been my attorney for 15 years. Since before Harold died and left me his business empire. He's also one of the few people who knows exactly how much that empire is worth. When he cleared his throat on the other end of the line, I could hear the concern in his voice. Dorothy, are you certain? Once we pull those investments, there's no going back. The ripple effects will be significant. I'm very certain. And Robert, activate the accelerated payment clauses on the Sterling Holdings loans. All of them. Long pause. That will trigger immediate default proceedings. Richard Sterling won't have 72 hours to respond. 48 hours should be sufficient. I watched through the library window as wedding guests mingled on the terrace, champagne glasses catching the evening light like tiny suns. After all, we wouldn't want to be unreasonable. And if they try to negotiate, I thought about Vanessa's name tag, about the laughter. About 3 years of careful planning leading to this moment. Tell them the charity case sends her regards. After ending the call, I slipped back to the reception long enough to kiss Michael goodbye and congratulate the happy couple. Vanessa was radiant in her triumph, accepting compliments on her honesty with false modesty that made my day. She had no idea she'd just triggered her own financial apocalypse. Leaving so early? She asked as I approached the head table. But we haven't even cut the cake yet. I'm sure you'll manage without me, I replied sweetly. After all, you're so good at making do with less. Her laugh tinkled like breaking glass. Oh, Dorothy, you're so funny. I do hope we can maintain this understanding between us. Understanding. Yes, we definitely had an understanding now. She understood that she could humiliate me publicly and face no consequences. I understood exactly who she was beneath the beautiful surface. What she didn't understand yet was who I was beneath mine. The next morning I sat on my small apartment balcony with coffee and waited. By my calculations, Richard Sterling would receive the first notification around 8 a.m. The banks didn't waste time when billions were at stake even on Sundays. People always assume that money talks, but in my experience it whispers. The real power lies in knowing which whispers to listen to and which ones to ignore. Harold taught me that during our 35 years of marriage, as he built his investment company from a one-room office into a financial empire that touched every major market on the East Coast. When he died 3 years ago, everyone expected me. So, a widow in her 60s, they assumed, would want to simplify her life, maybe buy a nice condo in Florida, and live off the interest. They didn't expect me to step into Harold's shoes and discover I had a natural talent for seeing the weak spots in other people's financial armor. The Sterling family had been particularly easy to research. Old money, they called themselves. But like many old money families, their wealth was more reputation than reality. Family business Sterling Holdings survived on leveraged investments and carefully managed debt. Remove the right pieces from their financial Jenga tower and the whole structure would collapse. What made it delicious was how easy they'd made it. Richard Sterling worked for Meridian Financial, one of the companies in my portfolio. He had no idea that the little old lady his daughter-in-law loved to mock actually controlled his paycheck. Patricia Sterling's charity boards all depended on grants from the Williams Foundation. Harold's final gift to me disguised under a name so common they'd never made the connection. Even their house, that magnificent estate where they'd held the wedding, was mortgaged through Sterling Holdings credit line. Credit line. That, as of 8 a.m. this morning, would be in default. My phone buzzed at 8:17 a.m. Michael. Mom, I just got the strangest call from Vanessa. She's crying about some kind of financial emergency. Her dad got calls from lawyers this morning. Something about investments and loan defaults. Do you know anything about this? I sipped my coffee, watching a cardinal build its nest in the oak tree outside my window. How would I know anything about their financial affairs, sweetheart? I'm just the charity case, remember? Mom, please. This isn't the time for jokes. Vanessa's really upset. She's saying her family might lose everything. That doesn't seem possible. They're loaded. Are they? Ask gently. Or do they just spend like they are? What's that supposed to mean? It means, Michael, that sometimes what appears to be wealth is actually just very expensive debt, and sometimes the people you think are powerless turn out to be holding all the cards. A long silence on the other end. Mom, what did you do? I smiled, thinking about Vanessa's name tag tucked safely in my purse. I made a phone call. By noon Sunday, my quiet apartment had become mission control for watching the Sterling family's world crumble. Spent years learning to read financial reports the way some people read mystery novels. And the Sterling Holdings portfolio was a page-turner. Robert called with updates every hour. The morning was just the beginning, he reported during his third call. Meridian Financial is reviewing all employees with potential conflicts of interest. Richard Sterling's position is precarious. And the house foreclosure proceedings will begin Tuesday unless they can produce $2.3 million by end of business tomorrow. Given their current liquidity crisis, that seems unlikely. I'd done my homework thoroughly. Over the past 6 months, while playing the role of humble mother-in-law, I'd quietly acquired controlling interests in everything the Sterling family depended on. Not directly, of course. That would have been traceable through shell companies, investment partnerships, and carefully structured trusts that would have taken a forensic accountant months to unravel. The beauty was in the timing. Wedding expenses had already stretched their credit lines to the breaking point. The $200,000 ceremony that was meant to display their wealth had actually been funded by borrowed money they couldn't afford to borrow. All I'd done was call in those loans simultaneously, like pulling multiple foundation blocks from a house of cards. My phone rang. Again. Michael sounding increasingly desperate. Mom, Vanessa's parents are freaking out. They're talking about selling the house, firing their staff, canceling the country club memberships. Her dad might lose his job. What kind of phone call could possibly cause all this? The kind that happens when someone mistakes kindness for weakness. I said, when they forget that quiet people often have the loudest voices when they choose to use them. This is about the name tag, isn't it? Mom, I saw it. I confronted Vanessa about it last night. She said it was just a joke. A joke. I repeated the word slowly, tasting its bitterness. Yes, I imagine she did think it was funny right up until this morning. Can't you undo whatever you did? Vanessa's beside herself. She's talking about how this will ruin their reputation. They'll never recover from the shame. Shame. Now there was an interesting word choice. And what about my shame? Michael. What about the shame of being publicly humiliated at my own son's wedding by a woman who's never worked a day in her life? She was wrong. I know that. But destroying her family seems extreme. I stood up, pacing to my small kitchen where Harold's picture still sat on the counter. He taught me many things, but the most important lesson was this: respect is not given, it's earned. And sometimes it has to be taken. I haven't destroyed anything, Michael. I've simply revealed what was already there. A house built on borrowed time and borrowed money. The Sterling family's wealth was always an illusion. I just decided to stop pretending it was real. So what happens now? I looked at my reflection in the kitchen window, seeing not the charity case Vanessa thought she'd humiliated, but the woman I'd always been underneath Harold's partner in every sense, his equal in business and in life. Now we see whether your wife is interested in learning about actual charity, because if she wants her family situation to improve, she's going to need some help. As she so eloquently pointed out yesterday, I'm apparently in the charity business. Monday morning brought what I'd been waiting for, a phone call from Vanessa herself. Her voice was different now, stripped of its usual arrogance and replaced with something I'd never heard from her before. Desperation. Dorothy, I need to speak with you. Could we meet for coffee? Course, dear, I said sweetly. I always have time for family. Even family who thinks I'm a charity case. The silence on the other end was telling. About that she began, but I cut her off. Let's meet at Marlowe's diner on 5th Street, 1 o'clock. I assume you know where it is. It's not exactly your usual scene, but I'm sure you'll manage. Marlowe's was perfect for what I had planned. A working-class diner where a woman in designer clothes would stand out like a peacock in a chicken coop. When Vanessa arrived at exactly 1 o'clock, she was almost unrecognizable. Gone was the perfectly styled hair and flawless makeup. She looked like she'd aged 5 years overnight, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the cracked vinyl booth across from me. Her hands shook as she picked up the laminated menu. "I don't know what to order. I've never eaten at a place like this." "The meatloaf special is excellent," I suggested. "Very affordable. I imagine that's important to you now." She flinched at the word affordable but nodded. When the waitress came over, a tired ill-looking woman about my age named Dolores, Vanessa could barely make eye contact. Interesting how wealth affected confidence. "So," I said after we'd ordered, "what can I do for you, Vanessa?" She took a shaky breath. "My father's going to lose his job. We might lose the house. Everything's falling apart, and I don't understand how this happened so fast. These things rarely happen fastly. Dear, they build up over time like water behind a dam. Eventually, something gives way and it all comes crashing down at once. Can you help us?" The words came out strangled, like they physically hurt to say. I stirred sugar into my coffee, taking my help you. I'm just the charity case. Remember, what could someone like me possibly do for someone like you? I was wrong to write that. I was angry and stupid and I took it out on you. Sorry. It was a start, but hardly enough. What exactly are you asking me to do, Vanessa? I don't know. Michael said you made some kind of phone call, that you might have connections. If there's any way you could help us, I'll do anything. Anything. Such a dangerous word to use with someone you've underestimated. Well, I said. Thoughtfully, I might know some people, but charity isn't free, dear. There are always conditions. Hope flickered in her eyes. What kind of conditions? I pulled out a folded piece of paper from my purse and slid it across the table. I've taken the liberty of drawing up a few simple requirements. Nothing too difficult for someone as resourceful as yourself. Vanessa's hands trembled as she read my list. I watched her face change with each line, confusion giving way to disbelief, then to something approaching horror. You want me to work as a cleaning lady for 6 months. Not just any cleaning lady, I corrected. You'll work for Sunshine Cleaning Service, the same company I worked for before Harold died. Mrs. Patterson runs good business. She'll teach you what honest work looks like. But I've never cleaned anything in my life. We've always had staff for that. Then you'll learn. Education is so important, don't you think? I sipped my coffee, enjoying the way she was processing this reversal of fortune. The second condition is that you'll volunteer at the homeless shelter. Every Saturday for the next year, serving meals, cleaning toilets, whatever they need. A homeless shelter. Her voice was barely a whisper. The very same one your mother's charity board pretends to support, but has never actually visited. You'll get to meet the people you've been helping from a distance all these years. You kept reading, her face growing paler with each requirement. You want me to live in your apartment building in a studio unit, just until you can afford something better on your cleaning lady salary. It's a nice building. You live there myself, remember. Though I suppose you'll be seeing quite a bit more of it than you expected. The meatloaf special arrived, giving Vanessa a moment to compose herself. She pushed the food around her plate without eating, clearly struggling to process what was happening to her world. And if I agree to all this, she asked finally, you'll help my family. I'll make some phone calls, see what can be done about those pesky loan defaults. Maybe even put in a good word for your father at his company. I paused, watching her carefully, though I should mention I have some influence at Meridian Financial, more than you might expect from a charity case. Something flickered in her eyes. The first hint that she was beginning to suspect there was more to me than she'd assumed. A kind of influence. I smiled mysteriously. The kind that comes from knowing the right people. Your father works in the acquisitions department, doesn't he? Handles major corporate buyouts. Yes, but I don't see what that has to do with. Oh, I think you'll find it has everything to do with your current situation. You see, Vanessa, companies like Meridian don't just lose money overnight unless someone very powerful decides they should. The fork slipped from her fingers, clattering against her plate. What are you saying? I'm saying that perhaps you should have asked more questions about your new mother-in-law before deciding to humiliate her at a public event. Background research is so important in business relationships. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first. Who are you? I'm exactly who I've always been. The woman who raised your husband to be a good man. The woman who's watched you treat him like an accessory to your social status. Woman who's about to give you a choice that will determine your family's future. I reached across the table and tapped my list of conditions. You have 24 hours to decide. Accept my terms and I'll consider helping your family. Refuse, and by Friday you'll be learning exactly what real charity looks like. When you're on the receiving end. Tuesday evening brought an unexpected visitor to my small apartment. Richard Sterling stood in my doorway looking like a man who'd aged a decade in 3 days. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, wrinkled shirt, unshaven face, the hollow look of someone who'd discovered his entire world was built on quicksand. Mrs. Williams, I hope you don't mind me coming by unannounced. Got your address from Michael. Not at all, Mr. Sterling. Please come in. Stepped aside, watching as he took in my modest living space. The same eyes that had looked through me at his daughter's engagement party now catalogued every detail with desperate attention. Can I offer you coffee? I'm afraid I don't have the expensive brands you're accustomed to. Coffee would be fine. He settled heavily into my small dining chair, looking completely out of place among my thrift store furniture and discount store decorations. While I prepared the coffee, he cleared his throat several times, obviously struggling with how to begin. Finally, as I set his cup down, he spoke. "No. What you did. Do you?" I sat across from him, genuinely curious. "What exactly do you think I did?" "You orchestrated everything. The loan defaults, the investment withdrawals, even my position at Meridian being under review. Someone with serious financial power decided to destroy my family. And the timing suggests it was you." I had to admire his directness. Desperation had stripped away his social pretenses, leaving behind a more honest version of himself. "That's quite an accusation, Richard. What makes you think someone like me would have that kind of power?" "Because I spent all night going through the corporate structures of the companies that pulled their support. Shell companies, investment partnerships, holding trusts, all very sophisticated financial instruments and all leading back to one source of funding, which is the Williams Foundation, Harold Williams Foundation, the same Harold Williams who built Meridian Financial from nothing and sold it to Sterling Holdings' parent company 15 years ago." The silence stretched between us as I sipped my coffee. So he'd finally done his homework. Better late than never, I suppose. "Harold Williams," I said slowly, "was my husband." Richard's face went white. "You're Dorothy Williams." "The Dorothy Williams, Harold's widow who inherited everything." I set down my cup with deliberate care, including controlling interest in the parent company that owns Sterling Holdings, including the investment firm that handles your family's portfolio, including, as of last year, 60% ownership in Meridian Financial itself. The coffee cup slipped from his hands, shattering against my linoleum floor. "You've been playing us from the beginning." "Playing you?" "No, Richard. I've been watching you, testing you, seeing what kind of people my son was marrying into." I stood up, getting paper towels to clean up the spilled coffee. The results were illuminating. The engagement party, the wedding planning. All those times you seemed so meek and accommodating. I was gathering information, learning about your family's character, your true financial situation, your values. I knelt to clean up the broken ceramic. "Do you know what I discovered?" He shook his head, apparently beyond words. "I discovered that your daughter wrote charity case on my name tag at her own wedding. That your wife introduced me to her friends as something embarrassing she had to tolerate. That your entire family found it amusing to mock a woman they believed was powerless." I stood up, disposing of the broken pieces in my small trash can. "But most interesting of all, I discovered that none of you ever asked who I really was. You saw what you expected to see and never looked deeper. What do you want from us?" For the first time in our conversation, I smiled. "Want you to understand what charity really means, Richard. It means helping someone who can't help themselves. Someone powerless who needs assistance from someone with power." I walked to my purse and pulled out Vanessa's copy of my conditions list. "Your daughter has until tomorrow to give me her answer. I suggest you encourage her to choose wisely." The next afternoon, Vanessa arrived at my apartment with Michael in tow. My son looked confused and hurt. The expression of a man who was finally realizing his mother wasn't who he'd thought she was, and neither was his wife. "Mom," he said as they settled on my small couch. "Vanessa told me about your conditions. This is crazy. Can't seriously expect her to work as a cleaning lady." "Why not? It's honest work. I did it myself for 2 years after. Your father died before I fully understood what he'd left me." Vanessa had been staring at her hands. "But now." She looked up. You really cleaned houses. Every day scrubbed toilets, mopped floors, dusted furniture for people who treated me like I was invisible. It was humbling work, but it taught me something valuable about character. What's that? Michael asked. It taught me that how you treat people you think are beneath you reveals everything about who you really are. I looked directly at Vanessa. Her mother-in-law, the charity case, has been cleaning up other people's messes her whole life. The only difference now is that she has the power to choose whose messes she's willing to clean up. Vanessa's voice was barely audible. Accept your conditions. Michael started to protest, but she held up her hand. No, Michael. She's right. I've been terrible to your mother and I need to make it right. If working as a cleaning lady and volunteering at a homeless shelter is what it takes, then that's what I'll do. And the apartment. Leaving your comfortable life to see how the other half lives. I'll do it all. Tears were streaming down her face. Oh, I was wrong about everything. I thought money made me better than other people, but I was just hiding behind my parents' wealth. When it was gone, I realized I don't know how to do anything useful. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but saw only genuine remorse and fear. This isn't a punishment, Vanessa, it's an education. You're going to learn skills that money can't buy. Empathy, humility, the satisfaction of honest work, and you'll really help my family if I do this. I'll do more than help them. I'll restore everything they've lost and more. Father will keep his job at Meridian. In fact, he'll receive a promotion. Your parents' house will be saved. Family reputation will be rebuilt stronger than before. Michael looked stunned. How can you promise all that? I walked to my small desk and pulled out a folder I'd been saving for this moment. Says I own the companies involved. All of them. Your mother-in-law isn't just wealthy, Michael. She's one of the most powerful women in American finance. Harold built an empire. And when he died, he left it all to me. I spread the documents across my coffee table. Corporate ownership papers, bank statements, investment portfolios. The numbers were staggering. Enough to make Michael sink back into his chair. The Williams Foundation controls over $12 billion in assets. Have majority stakes in 17 major corporations, including Meridian Financial, Sterling Holdings' parent company, and most of the banks that were threatening foreclosure. Vanessa was staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. You could have stopped all this any time. Course I could have. But then how would you have learned what really matters in life? This was all a test. He nodded. The most important test you'll ever take, and you failed it spectacularly when you wrote charity case on my name tag. But failure doesn't have to be final. Vanessa, sometimes it's just the beginning of real education. Michael was shaking his head in amazement. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me about any of this? Because I wanted you to love me for who I am, not what I own. Money changes people, Michael. It makes them see dollar signs instead of human hearts. I needed to know that my family loved Dorothy the person, not Dorothy the billionaire. I looked at both of them sitting on my discount furniture in my modest apartment. Now you understand why I live simply, why I choose to drive a 10-year-old car and shop at discount stores. Real wealth isn't about what you spend. It's about having the power to help people and the wisdom to know when they deserve it. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of Meridian Financial, watching Vanessa scrub the marble floors. Her once perfect manicure was gone, her hands rough from honest work. She wore the blue uniform of Sunshine Cleaning Service with something I'd never seen from her before. Pride. Mrs. Williams, she said, looking up from her work. I didn't expect to see you here. I had a board meeting upstairs. But I check on how you're adjusting to your new life. She sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her forehead. It's hard work, but I'm learning things I never knew about myself. Did you know I'm actually good with my hands? Mrs. Patterson says I have a natural talent for detail work. I'm not surprised. You always had an eye for perfection. Just needed to apply it to something meaningful. Over the past 6 months, I'd watched Vanessa transform. A shallow socialite who'd humiliated me at her wedding had gradually disappeared, replaced by someone who understood the value of work, the dignity of service, and the importance of treating everyone with respect. How are things at the homeless shelter? Her face lit up. Another change I'd never seen before. Amazing. There's this little girl, Maria, who comes in with her mother every Saturday. She's teaching me Spanish, and I'm helping her with her homework. I never realized how much I could learn from people I used to think were beneath me. And the apartment, small but comfortable. I'm actually going to be sorry to leave it when my 6 months are up. He paused, studying my face. That is, if you're really going to hold up your end of the bargain. Oh, I think you'll find I'm very good at keeping promises. I reached into my purse and pulled out a sealed envelope. Your father's promotion was announced this morning. Senior Vice President of Acquisitions with a significant salary increase. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope and read the official letter. How did you? Told you, dear. Own the company. Your parents' house is also being transferred into a family trust that will ensure it can never be lost to creditors again. Consider it my wedding gift to you and Michael. Tears were streaming down her face, cutting tracks through the dust on her cheeks. Why are you doing this after how badly I treated you? Because you passed the real test, Vanessa. Not the one where you failed to show me basic human respect, but the one where you chose to change instead of making excuses. Character isn't about never falling down. About getting back up and becoming better than you were before. I helped her to her feet, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked me directly in the eyes as an equal. The charity case, she said softly, turned out to be the one offering charity. That's how charity is supposed to work, I replied. Those who have the most give to those who need it most. I needed to know you were worth saving. You needed to discover who you could become when everything was stripped away. As I walked toward the elevator, she called after me. Dorothy, will you come to dinner Sunday? I'm cooking for the first time in my life. It probably won't be very good, but I turned back smiling. I'd be honored. After all, we're family now. Real family. The kind built on respect and love instead of obligation and appearances. The elevator doors closed, but through the glass I could see Vanessa returning to her work with renewed purpose. She'd learned the most important lesson I could teach her. True wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch and the people you lift up along the way. My son's wedding, his new wife had written my name tag as the charity case. She'd expected laughter and got education instead. Sometimes the best revenge is helping someone become the person they were always capable of being. And sometimes the greatest charity we can offer is the chance to discover our own capacity for grace. The story continues in the next chapter in the next linked video. But first, I need you to subscribe to join the family as we are looking forward to our first 10,000 subscribers, and feel free to share your story in the comments. You don't want to miss the next story.